When the truth shattered my world, I never expected my sister-in-law to stand by my husband's mistress. In a single night, I lost both my marriage and a lifelong confidant. My heart broke into a million pieces at the dinner table, where laughter turned to silence. By dawn, I had made a choice of my own. I packed my bags and walked away from the betrayal, leaving behind not just a home, but a family that no longer felt like one. Now, as I stand on the brink of rebuilding, I realize that loss can lead to unexpected strength. My name is Zoe. I refuse to be the victim of their choices any longer. As I stepped out of the door, a chill swept through the early morning air, mingling with the remnants of my heartache. I had driven through the city streets countless times, but this morning felt different, like I was a stranger in my own life. My thoughts spiraled around Derek and Rachel, inseparable in their betrayal, each memory a jagged shard that cut deeper than the last. I knew that confronting them head-on would only lead to more pain, yet the thought of them together gnawed at me, a constant reminder of the life I once cherished. I needed a moment to breathe, to collect myself away from the chaos they had created. I drove aimlessly for a while, my mind a whirlpool of emotions, until I found myself at a small cafe on the edge of town. The warm light spilling from the windows felt like a beacon of hope amidst my swirling despair. I stepped inside, the bell above the door ringing softly as I took a seat at a corner table, away from prying eyes. I ordered a coffee, hoping the bitterness would somehow match my mood, but as I sat quietly, I felt an unexpected warmth settle in my chest. I took a deep breath, focusing on the clatter of cups and the distant hum of conversations. It was a reminder that life continued outside the prison of my thoughts. Fiona would be my first call. My mother had always been my rock, even when the storms raged. I could almost hear her voice in my head, urging me to stand tall and remember my worth. I scrolled through my contacts, hesitating before pressing call. My finger hovered over Derek's name, my heart racing at the thought of his voice, but I quickly dismissed the idea. I needed to find my own footing before allowing him back into my life, if ever. When Fiona picked up, her voice was laced with concern. "Zoe, is everything okay? You sound different." I took a moment to gather my thoughts, choking back the swell of tears. "Mom, I'm not okay," I finally admitted, my voice trembling. "Derek and Rachel, it's all a mess." Silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of my revelation. I could picture her furrowing her brow, probably wishing she could bridge the miles separating us with her comforting presence. "What are you going to do?" she asked softly, and I realized that I hadn't thought that far ahead. "I don't know yet," I replied honestly. "But I need to figure out who I am without him." The thought rang true, resonating in a way I hadn't anticipated. I had devoted so much of myself to our relationship, to the life we built together, that I had lost sight of the person I used to be. As I hung up, a flicker of determination ignited within me. I couldn't allow Rachel's actions to dictate my path any longer. Marcus had always been the mediator in our family, the calming force when tempers flared. I texted him, asking if we could meet. Within minutes, he replied with a supportive, "Of course, I'm here for you." I appreciated his willingness to listen, but part of me worried about burdening him with my troubles. After all, he had his own challenges, trying to keep Fiona steady amid the storm that was now my life. But I needed an ally, someone who could help me navigate the fallout. When we met at a nearby park, the sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the ground. I told him everything. The pain of discovery, the feeling of betrayal, and my resolve to reclaim my identity. He listened quietly, nodding occasionally, and offered insight that was both comforting and enlightening. "You deserve happiness, Zoe. Don't let them rob you of that," he said, and his words settled deep within me, resonating like a soothing balm over an open wound. I was not just a victim of their choices, I was a person capable of making my own. As I drove home later, I realized that the true battle lay ahead. I needed to confront Derek and Rachel to demand answers, but I also understood that this confrontation would not define my future. Instead, it would be a step towards reclaiming my narrative. It was time to take back control, and as daunting as that felt, I also felt a thrill of anticipation at the possibilities it could bring. Back at home, I opened my laptop and started researching support groups for individuals dealing with infidelity and relationship recovery. I read stories of women like me who had faced a similar heartbreak, and each account bolstered my spirit. I began drafting a plan, not just for confronting Derek, but also for my own healing journey. I set aside time for yoga and meditation, activities I had once cherished but abandoned while wrapped up in the chaos of my marriage. I was determined to nurture myself, to cultivate resilience where there had once been vulnerability. That evening, I found myself cooking a simple dinner, filling the house with the scents of garlic and herbs. I realized how healing the process of creating a meal could be, the rhythm of chopping vegetables and stirring a pot, allowing my mind to settle. Each stir felt like a step away from the pain, and I couldn't help but smile at the thought of reclaiming my space, my life. As night fell, I sat on the couch, contemplating the road ahead. The shadows of betrayal still lingered, but I felt a newfound resolve brewing within me. Tomorrow, I would face Derek. And I would not back down. I would demand the truth and clarity I deserved. In that moment, I chose to believe in my own strength, ready to embrace whatever came next. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow that felt almost foreign against the chill of my heart. I prepared myself for the confrontation, each routine action, pouring coffee, brushing my hair, becoming a ritual of empowerment. I caught a glimpse of my reflection and realized I hardly recognized the woman staring back at me. I had been so consumed by the betrayal that I had forgotten who I was beneath the layers of hurt and confusion. The image of Derek and Rachel's laughter together haunted me, yet I had made a promise to myself to confront him, to demand answers and reclaim my dignity. As I stepped into the kitchen, the air was thick with unspoken words. I found Derek at the table, seemingly absorbed in his phone, a tense silence hanging between us like a fragile thread. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady, but inside a storm raged. He looked up, his expression a mixture of surprise and apprehension, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. "What about?" he asked, feigning indifference, but I could see the cracks in his facade. I pulled out a chair and sat down across from him, unwilling to let his evasiveness deter me. "About us, about you and Rachel." The name felt heavy on my tongue, a bitter reminder of the betrayal I never asked for. Derek sighed, running a hand through his hair as if he could brush away the reality of the situation. He began, but I cut him off, my heart pounding as I leaned closer. "Don't you dare minimize this. You've shattered everything we built together." I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, fueled by anger and hurt. How could you do this to me, to our life? He opened his mouth to respond, but words failed him. Instead, he looked down, his shoulders slumping. It was a small victory, a crack in his armor, but I knew it wasn't enough. I deserved to know why, Derek. Why her? What does she have that I didn't? The vulnerability in my voice surprised even me, revealing depths of pain I had tried to suppress. "I don't know," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "It just happened." His words struck me like a slap, igniting a surge of fury. "Just happened? You call that an excuse?" I stood up, unable to contain the whirlwind of emotions swirling within me. The betrayal felt like a knife, twisting deeper with each half-hearted justification he offered. "You didn't think about me, about us, when you were with her." The silence that followed felt suffocating. I could see the gears turning in Derek's mind, the realization that he was losing me. For years, I had been the one who supported him through thick and thin, yet here he was, shattering my trust for something fleeting and superficial. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what came next. "I need you to leave. I can't do this anymore." Derek's eyes widened in disbelief, and I could see the panic rise within him. "Zoe, wait, please. Let's not make any rash decisions," he pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. But I was resolute. "Rash? This is the result of your choices. You made your decision when you chose to betray me." As he remained silent, I felt a wave of empowerment wash over me. I was reclaiming my agency, my sense of self, even if it felt painful and terrifying. I turned away from him, feeling the weight of his presence press against my back. I needed space, distance to find clarity amidst the chaos that had engulfed my life. Later that day, my mother, Fiona, stopped by unexpectedly. She always had a sixth sense for when I was struggling, and her warm, comforting presence provided a balm for my wounded heart. I could see the concern etched on her face as she walked in, her eyes scanning the kitchen before settling on me. "How are you holding up, Shin?" "Sweetheart?" she asked softly, taking my hands in hers. I sighed, the vulnerability bubbling to the surface once again. I confronted Derek. "He's still in denial about everything," I admitted, the weight of my words hanging heavy between us. I asked him to leave. Fiona's expression shifted to one of surprise, pride mingled with concern. "That's a brave step, Zoe. You deserve to be treated with respect." Her words wrapped around me like a warm hug, but the insecurity still gnawed at the edges of my thoughts. But what if I made the wrong choice? What if he truly loves me and he just messed up? I could hear the uncertainty in my voice, a betrayal of the strength I had just begun to embrace. "Love doesn't hurt like that," Fiona replied firmly, looking deep into my eyes. "You must protect yourself first. It's not about what he wants, it's about what you need." Her words sank in, stirring a sense of resolve that I knew would take time to solidify. I remembered Rachel and how she had manipulated her way into our lives, how her actions had sparked this entire mess. "What about Rachel?" I asked, bitterness lacing my tone. "What do I do about her?" Fiona sighed, her face tightening with a mixture of sympathy and anger. "Focus on healing, on finding your strength again. Let her face the consequences of her actions." As we talked, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. I could reclaim my life, step by step, but the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Yet, surrounded by love and support, perhaps I could navigate the murky waters of betrayal and emerge stronger than before. The world felt uncertain, but I was ready to face it head-on. As the evening approached, I glanced out of the window, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I realized that despite the pain, there was beauty to be found in the journey ahead. Whatever awaited me, I would confront it with resilience and grace. The scars of betrayal would not define me. Instead, they would become part of my story, a story of reclaiming my power. If you resonate with this journey of resilience and healing, consider subscribing for more stories that explore the complexities of love, trust, and the strength within us all. As I navigated the turbulent waters of my new reality, I found myself often retreating to the small garden in the back of our house. The flowers there seemed to echo my feelings, beautiful yet fragile, vibrant in color yet easily wilted. I spent countless hours tending to them, watering the roots as I wished to nurture my own. With each passing day, I learned to cultivate not just the soil, but my heart, turning my anger into something productive. It was therapeutic to pull weeds, to uproot the pain that had taken hold, and replant seeds of hope, even if the future felt uncertain. Fiona, my mother, sensed my struggles. She would often come out to join me, offering quiet companionship rather than advice. With her, there was no pretense. She understood that sometimes silence spoke louder than words. "You're stronger than you think," she would say, her gentle tone reassuring me that I was not alone. Marcus, my stepfather, would occasionally peek into the garden, a worried frown creasing his forehead. He wanted to protect us, to hold the family together, despite the cracks that seemed to widen with each revelation about Derek and Rachel. Yet I couldn't help but feel a growing distance. Their efforts, while well-meaning, often felt like band-aids on deep wounds that needed more than superficial healing. Derek's absence hung heavily over our home. Each time I caught sight of his belongings, the ache of betrayal gnawed at me. Memories flooded back, us laughing in the kitchen, planning vacations, whispering sweet nothings late into the night. Now, those moments felt like a distant dream, tainted by the shadows cast by his infidelity. I had always thought of our love as a fortress, but here I was, staring at the crumbling walls, grappling with the weight of secrets he had kept from me. One afternoon, as I pruned the roses, I noticed Fiona standing at the edge of the garden, her expression unreadable. I paused, feeling the tension in the air. "Do you think we can ever forgive them?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The question hung between us, heavy with unspoken fears. She took a deep breath, her eyes reflecting the years of heartache she had endured herself. "Forgiveness isn't a gift we give to others, Zoe. It's something we do for ourselves," she replied, her wisdom a balm to my wounded spirit. "Holding on to anger will only weigh you down." Later that evening, I sat alone in our living room, the dim light casting shadows across the walls. I flipped through a photo album, each image a reminder of what used to be. My heart ached as I lingered on pictures of Derek and me, our smiles frozen in time. I had invested so much of myself into our marriage, only to feel betrayed by the very person I loved most. In that moment, I realized I needed to confront him. I needed closure, not just for him, but for myself. The following day, I called Derek and asked him to meet me at our favorite cafe. My hands trembled as I wrote down the points I wanted to discuss, but I knew I had to approach this conversation with honesty and strength. When I arrived, I was greeted by a wave of nostalgia. The cafe was bustling, but all I could see was the corner table where we had shared countless cups of coffee and dreams for the future. When Derek walked in, the warmth of his smile felt like a slap in the face. How could he look so carefree after everything that had happened? I gestured for him to sit, my heart racing. "We need to talk," I said, steadying my voice as I took a deep breath. He nodded, the moment turning heavy with unspoken words. "Zoe, he began, but I cut him off. "No, you don't get to explain yet. I need you to hear me first." His expression shifted from surprise to realization. "I loved you, Derek. I trusted you, but that trust has been shattered, and I can't pretend everything is okay." Each word felt like a stone dropped into a still pond, sending ripples of truth across the surface of our relationship. He looked down, his guilt palpable. "I made a terrible mistake," he admitted, his voice strained. "Rachel, it was wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me." His honesty was refreshing yet infuriating. "You need to understand that your actions have consequences, Derek. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about me, about what I need to feel whole again," I replied, my voice rising with emotion. As the conversation unfolded, I felt a weight lifting. I laid bare my hurt, my confusion, and the anger that had been simmering beneath the surface. Derek listened, really listened, and for the first time, I saw a glimpse of remorse in his eyes. Perhaps this was a step toward healing, even if it felt like we were still miles apart. After we finished talking, I realized I was still standing on the brink of a decision. I needed to reclaim my life, not just as Derek's wife, but as Zoe, a woman deserving of respect and love. The path ahead was still uncertain, but I could feel the stirrings of strength within me. I was no longer just a victim of betrayal. I was a survivor, ready to rewrite my own story, one that didn't involve a fractured marriage or the shadows of deceit. The choice to move forward was mine, and it was time to embrace it. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow in the living room, but I felt a heaviness in my heart that the sun couldn't chase away. I had spent the night tossing and turning, my mind racing with thoughts of Derek and Rachel, the betrayal gnawing at my insides like an insatiable beast. I knew I had to confront my feelings, but the idea of facing Derek brought with it a wave of dread. He had become a stranger to me, a man wrapped in lies and secrets, and I was determined not to let him dictate my happiness any longer. When I finally mustered the courage to step into the kitchen, Fiona was already up, brewing coffee. The aroma wafted through the air, a comforting reminder of better mornings, but even that could not erase the tension hanging between us. My mother, usually a steady source of support, looked up at me with concern etched on her face. "Zoe, are you okay?" she asked softly, her voice a mixture of worry and love. I forced a smile, grateful for her presence, but also aware that my battles were mine to fight. "I will be," I replied, though I wasn't entirely convinced. I needed clarity, a moment to gather my thoughts without the weight of the world pressing down on me. So I decided to take a walk. The crisp morning air greeted me as I stepped outside, each breath feeling like a step toward reclaiming my life. As I strolled through the neighborhood, memories of my time with Derek flickered like old film reels, but I focused on the present, on what lay ahead. I spotted a few familiar faces, people who had been part of our lives before the scandal broke, and their smiles reminded me of the community I belonged to, even if it felt fractured. I found myself at a small park, a place where Derek and I had spent countless afternoons, laughing and dreaming about our future. Sitting on a bench, I closed my eyes, allowing the sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves to wash over me. I envisioned a life free of the shadows that had consumed me, one where I could rediscover who I was. It was liberating to think of life beyond Derek, beyond the pain and the lies. As I sat there, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I hesitated before checking it, half expecting it to be a message from Derek, but it was Fiona. She wanted to meet for lunch, and I could sense her concern through her text. I replied with a simple acknowledgement, deciding that I could use the time to talk things through with her. When I returned home, the kitchen felt stifling, full of unspoken words and lingering tension. Fiona set the table, her movements careful and deliberate, as if trying to keep the atmosphere light. Over lunch, she attempted to steer the conversation to neutral topics, but I could see the worry etched in her features, the silent questions swirling in her mind. After a few minutes of casual chatter, I finally broached the topic that loomed over us. "Mom, I need to know what you think I should do about Derek." Fiona's fork paused midair, and she set it down slowly. "Zoe, it's complicated. I know how much you love him, but I also see how hurt you are. You deserve to be happy, to be with someone who cherishes you." Her words were steady, but I could hear the tremor beneath them, the pain of a mother watching her daughter suffer. "I can't keep living like this," I admitted, the floodgates of emotion opening wide. "I feel lost, and I don't even know if I can trust him anymore." The tears I had been holding back finally spilled over, and I found myself seeking comfort in her presence. Fiona reached across the table, her hand warm and reassuring, and I squeezed it tightly, feeling the love and support I so desperately needed. As we continued to talk, I realized how crucial it was to accept my feelings, to allow myself to be vulnerable. I didn't have all the answers, and perhaps that was okay. The thought of confronting Derek again hung over me like a storm cloud. I didn't want to be the woman who allowed herself to be walked all over, but I also didn't want to become someone consumed by bitterness. Later that evening, as I prepared for the inevitable confrontation, I steeled myself. I knew Derek would return home soon, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. When he walked through the door, I could see the tension in his posture. He was aware of the chasm that had formed between us, and I could feel the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. "Zoe," he began, but I raised my hand to stop him. "No, just listen. I need you to hear me out without interrupting." He nodded, surprise flickering in his eyes. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay. What happened between us has changed everything, and I refuse to live in the shadows of your choices anymore. My voice was steady, yet the emotions behind it threatened to spill over. Derek looked stricken, and for the first time, I could see the cracks in his facade. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, his voice laced with guilt. "Rachel, it was a mistake." "Was it just a mistake, Derek?" I challenged, my heart pounding in my chest. "Because it feels like so much more than that. You made a choice, and I need to know if you're willing to choose me again." His silence spoke volumes, and in that moment, I understood the depth of the chasm that lay between us. The weight of his decisions had created a barrier, one that might not be easily crossed. But as I looked into his eyes, I also felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this confrontation, however painful, could be the start of rebuilding something stronger, or the final chapter in a story that needed to close. I was ready to find out which path I would choose. As I stood there, my heart racing, I felt the tension thickening the air around us. Derek's silence was deafening, and it filled the space with unspoken words, guilt, and fear. I had always known him as someone who took pride in his honesty, but now his gaze was averted, suggesting there were truths he couldn't face. I inhaled deeply, trying to steady myself against the storm of emotions surging within me. A part of me longed to retreat, to escape the suffocating atmosphere of betrayal, but another part urged me to remain grounded, to confront this reality head-on. I refused to be a passive victim in this narrative. "Why did you do it?" My voice trembled slightly, betraying the vulnerability I was trying to mask. I didn't want to come off as weak, but I needed answers. Derek's eyes flickered with regret, and for a brief moment, I caught a glimpse of the man I once knew. "Zoe, I didn't mean for it to happen. Rachel, she was there for me in ways I never expected." His words stung like a slap, each syllable laced with betrayal and confusion. I felt the walls around my heart tightening, a reaction I hadn't anticipated. "Ways you needed? What about the ways I've always been there for you?" I shot back, my anger bubbling to the surface, mixing with the hurt that still lingered. "You chose her over me, Derek. You let her manipulate you into believing that our love wasn't enough." I could see his jaw clenching, the internal battle raging within him as if my words were forcing him to confront a reality he wanted to deny. "I made a mistake, Zoe," he finally whispered, but the apology felt hollow, more like an excuse than true remorse. I wanted to believe that he could redeem himself, that there was still a chance for us, yet the shadow of Rachel loomed large, a reminder of the choices he had made. In that moment, I realized that rebuilding would require more than just apologies. It would require actions, real actions that demonstrated his commitment to our marriage. As I processed his admission, I thought of Rachel, the woman who had invaded my life, had taken what was sacred between Derek and me, was perhaps even more lost than I realized. What did she hope to gain by tearing apart our family? Was it worth it to her? I felt a pang of sympathy mixed with the bitterness of betrayal. My heart ached for Derek, for the man I fell in love with. But I couldn't help feeling a surge of strength rise within me, pushing me to reclaim my narrative. "I can't do this right now," I said, the weight of my words heavy with finality. I didn't want to hear any more excuses. I needed time to think, to process what had just unfolded. I turned and walked out, feeling the tears pooling in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I had been broken, but I was not defeated. This was the moment I had to start piecing together the fragments of my life. Outside, the world felt surreal, as if everything had paused in disbelief. I needed my mother, someone who could help me navigate this emotional turmoil. Fiona had always been my rock, even in her own struggles, and I hoped she would understand my pain. As I drove to her house, I found myself grappling with questions I couldn't quite answer. How could I rebuild trust after it was shattered? Was love enough to mend the broken pieces of our lives? When I arrived at Fiona's, the familiar warmth of her home enveloped me, but I felt so far removed from that comfort. Marcus greeted me at the door, his concern evident as he took one look at my face. "Zoe, what happened?" he asked, his voice low and soothing. "I need to talk to Mom," I replied, my words barely above a whisper. Fiona was in the kitchen, preparing tea, a comforting ritual she often turned to when faced with life's challenges. As soon as I walked in, she sensed my distress and immediately set aside the kettle. "Zoe, honey, what's wrong?" Her eyes searched mine, filled with a mix of love and worry. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my revelation pressing down on me. "Derek, he's been seeing Rachel. It's over, Mom. I can't believe I thought we were fine." Fiona's expression shifted from concern to shock, her hands trembling slightly as she processed my words. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. You deserve so much more than this." Tears began to flow freely as I recounted the confrontation, the betrayal, the unbearable reality of my marriage crumbling before my eyes. As I spoke, I could feel Marcus listening quietly in the background, his presence a steady reminder that family could be a source of strength, even in the darkest moments. Fiona reached out, wrapping her arms around me, a gesture of comfort that I desperately needed. "We'll get through this together," she said softly. "You're not alone." For the first time since I learned of Derek's affair, I felt a flicker of hope. I realized that while the path ahead would be difficult, I could lean on my family for support. I needed to gather my strength, to rise from the ashes of my heartbreak, and to reclaim the life that had been shaken to its core. My story was far from over, and perhaps, in time, I would learn to forgive, not just Derek, but also myself for allowing this to happen. As I sat there, enveloped in my mother's love, I couldn't help but think of others who might find themselves in a similar situation. If you've ever faced betrayal or heartbreak, I invite you to share your story. There's power in our experiences, and together we can find healing and strength in the midst of our struggles. Feeling the warmth of my mother's presence reminded me of how resilient love can be, even when tested by betrayal. I glanced around the room, filled with remnants of happier times, family photos, gifts from birthdays, and even the little trinkets Derek and I had collected together. Each item held its own memory, a reminder of laughter and shared dreams now overshadowed by heartbreak. I knew I had a long road ahead in order to piece my life back together, but I also understood that the journey would be mine alone. Derek had made his choice, and in doing so, he had forced me to confront the reality of who I was without him. As I began to process everything, a wave of determination surged within me. I would not allow this betrayal to define my existence. Instead, I would reshape it into something stronger. Marcus's voice broke through my thoughts, steady and encouraging as he spoke to my mother. "Zoe needs us now more than ever, Fiona. We need to rally around her." His sincerity struck a chord in me, amplifying the support I had. Here was a man committed to keeping our family together, despite the chaos brought on by Derek and Rachel. I felt a flicker of gratitude for Marcus. He was like an anchor, holding us steady amidst the turmoil. Although the rift between our families had widened, I realized that I still had allies in this battle against the fallout of deceit. Deciding it was time to take charge, I opened my laptop and began to write. I poured my heart into an email to my closest friends, sharing the painful truth of my situation. I was done hiding behind a facade, pretending that everything was perfect when it clearly wasn't. Each keystroke felt liberating, a cathartic release of the emotions I had bottled up for too long. My friends responded with an outpouring of love and support, offering to be there for me as I navigated this tumultuous time. I could already envision our gathering, laughter, stories, and a reminder that the world still held beauty beyond my personal turmoil. Days turned into weeks, and the initial shock began to wear off. I immersed myself in self-care, rediscovering passions I had neglected in favor of my marriage. I took long walks in the park, which allowed me to reconnect with nature. Each step felt lighter as I left behind the weight of heartache, even if just for a moment. I started painting again, using vibrant colors to express the emotions swirling inside me. I had forgotten how powerful it was to translate feelings onto canvas, turning pain into art. With every brushstroke, I chipped away at the grief, transforming it into something beautiful. During this time, Derek attempted to reach out, sending texts that felt like desperate pleas for forgiveness. I ignored them, firm in my decision to stand my ground. He had lost the right to dictate the terms of our relationship. I would no longer be the one waiting for him to choose me over Rachel. I focused on creating a new version of myself, one who could embrace her independence and confront life's challenges head-on. I also began to engage with support groups that focused on healing from infidelity, where I met others who had faced similar heartaches. Hearing their stories resonated with me, solidifying my belief that I wasn't alone. One afternoon, as I was leaving a support meeting, a familiar face caught my eye. It was Rachel, standing near the entrance, her expression a mix of defiance and vulnerability. My heart raced, but I reminded myself of the strength I had gained. We locked eyes, and for a moment, the world around us faded away. She approached me hesitantly, and I felt a surge of mixed emotions: anger, hurt, but also an unexpected sense of pity. The woman who had betrayed my trust was now standing before me, stripped of her bravado. "Zoe," she began, her voice shaky, "I never meant for it to go this far." Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. "Then why did you?" I challenged, my voice steady despite the tumult inside me. I was ready to reclaim my narrative, to confront the very person who had contributed to my pain. Rachel sighed, her facade beginning to crack. I was lost. I thought I was doing something exciting, something that would make me feel alive, but now I see the destruction it caused. Her admission surprised me, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a flicker of compassion. Perhaps Rachel was a victim of her own insecurities, but that didn't excuse her actions. I took a deep breath, determined not to let her manipulation affect me any longer. Your choices led to the unraveling of my marriage and the pain of our family. I hope you understand the gravity of that. For the first time, I saw vulnerability in her eyes, and with it came a sense of closure for me. I no longer felt the weight of resentment dragging me down. Instead, I felt empowered. I had confronted my husband's mistress, standing tall despite the emotional scars. I was ready to move forward, with or without Derek. As I walked away from that encounter, I felt lighter, unshackled from the chains of betrayal. My identity was no longer intertwined with Derek's. I was Zoe, a woman who had faced the storm and emerged stronger. I knew that healing would take time, but I was on the right path. With every step I took, I felt my heart begin to mend, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next.